Hello, welcome back to the Soul Sync podcast. Now, today's conversation is all about the power, because at the very beginning of my mediumship, I just couldn't really understand what this power was. Everyone was referring to, and it seemed to be what's about all the time. It seemed to be the thing that I was striving to aspire to was to build the power, manipulate the power, be with the power, then accept that I am the power. And that seemed to bring about more questions than answers for me along my journey, which then made me just go headfirst into just wanting to understand all of this. So today, fellow medium Adam Berry and I are going to be discussing our understanding of what the power is versus at the very beginning, and how our relationship has changed with it and how it's evolved. I really feel when I'm in the power now. I really know when I'm in it. And I know how to build it. I know how to manipulate it, because that's what I do as a medium. And so much of the work that I'm doing at the moment in developing where I want to go with my demonstrations of mediumship is about manipulating energy and being able to really build it up so the spirit world can absolutely thrive and use that energy to bring through the powerful messages that they want to. So this is a two-part special. Firstly, it's about Adam and I discussing what the power is. Second part is going to be a meditation where Adam leads you directly into the power. I can promise you no two listens of that will ever be the same, because it changes every time. So enjoy. Welcome back to the Soul Sync.
Hello, Jason. Thank you for having me back.
Oh, it's so lovely to have you back, and thank you for coming on, because I know that you're very busy. I mean, all the things that you do to keep yourself busy with. So it's lovely to have you on. And today we're going to be talking about the power. And we have spoken about the power before, but I wanted to talk about the power again, because my understanding and my relationship with it has evolved over a matter of time. And I think last time we were talking, I was still trying to find where the switch was, Adam. I've since found the switch, and the switch is being activated daily. But for people that are just joining us now, because it is one of the questions I get emailed most about, what and how would you describe what the power is, so people understand what we're even talking about at this early juncture?
Okay, so when I was first introduced to the power, I've said this before, it was at the Arthur Findlay College on Glyn Edwards Week. He was the one that has sort of produced the CD, Sitting in the Power, and that was something that I took away and was trying to do in the best way possible, but not understanding exactly what it was. Because, you know, you come into the Arthur Findlay College and you come into mediumship and you're like a child in a sweetie shop, aren't you? It's like there's so many things that are catching your attention of about mediumship and the spirit world. But learning within your mediumship, the power was fundamental, I was taught. So it was a case of I was searching for this power, similar to what your journey was as well, you know, like searching for it, trying to understand where it is, how does it affect me, searching literally outside of myself, looking to other people that can give me this power, you know, and cultivate this power in some way. And I was on this sort of journey until realizing that, you know, the power is within us and around us, always available. And it is the power of God, the Creator, Allah, Christ consciousness, the universe, whatever you perceive it to be. And it's, I suppose it's understanding that, but how your relationship is with that, because we are all different at different stages within our lives as well, and our development and our understanding of mediumship, and even our mediumship changes and our philosophy changes. And it's, we go deeper within that understanding as our life unfolds further as well, I feel, and through the experience and understanding with the spirit world, with our own soul, with our life, with our own philosophy, And yeah, it wasn't just about being the best medium I could be, fundamentally knowing this power, but I believe it's the being the best human being you can be with compassion. And I believe the power has that potential to give purpose to your life. It's unfolding that purpose and recognizing that purpose. And you can then, it's the potential is limitless, really, in whatever your soul's potential is.
And even as you're saying that, it reminds me back at the very early days of my development, where for a long time, I was trying to reach out of myself to access the power. But like you rightly said, the power exists in everything. The power is all around us. It is infinite. It is unlimited in its power. But it took me a long time to realize that. And it took me, I always remember that first time that I sat in the power and actually felt that I had experienced the power, because for quite some time I thought I was experiencing the power, but I would say that I was more experiencing the sensation of spirit around me, which, yes, is the power, but I was again very much associating it as outside of me. And I would say that the first time that I started to realize that I had touched it, it was different from a normal sitting, because normally it was a feeling of stillness and relaxation. But when the power came close to me, which I believe that very first time was almost like an angel, because it was such an overpowering feeling of love. And actually it was so overpowering, that feeling of love, that it actually made me come out of the power, because it felt overwhelming and over stimulating. But I think your relationship with the power depends very much on where you are in your life at the time. And when I first went into mediumship, I wasn't in the best frame of mind. I was struggling with more worldly muggle matters. And, like we've said even before, when someone said that God is within you, I had a big problem with the word God. So it took me a very long time to understand that. And only yesterday I was doing a reading with a medium who I didn't know was a medium when I went into the reading. But she told me at the very end that she used to do mediumship, had stopped, and one of the biggest hurdles she's got is her relationship with the word God. And that seemed to be so much so the case for her that it had stopped her doing her mediumship for years. And then the funny thing about it actually was, I've got angel cards, and at the end of my reading I always love to pull one of these particular angel cards because they're beautiful cards and the message is always so poignant. And I think there's only one card in the deck that references God. And at the end of the reading, of course, it was that card that came up. And I laughed, because I said, look, already this is challenging your own relationship with that word. So, and it's a lot for a lot of people to swallow this, to understand that the power is within them. That can even be a big concept to swallow, because why am I not feeling in a good way if I've got this infinite power within me?
Yeah, yeah. It comes onto as well that word God. I created a workshop, a class and session about sitting in the power, and I recognized that I had a problem with God years ago. And my understanding of God, the God that's on a cloud chucking thunderbolts at people for things that they've done wrong, and I spent quite a lot of time in this workshop to break down the concept of God, to change the name of God so it's palatable for everybody. So whether it's they feel like the universe is more comfortable with their perception of God or the creator, then use that. Because if that is a barrier to your experience of God, then if you take that barrier away, and when you do experience the power, I've said this before, it doesn't matter what it's called, because you've experienced it and you can call it anything. You won't mind calling it God, because then you've experienced it, but in a totally different way from what your conscious mind perceives it to be. But something has gone another level with me, I suppose, in another direction. And it was actually during a teaching session, and I was talking someone through into the power. And I said something that I would never normally say. As a spiritualist, I wouldn't say this. And instead of saying, you know, we're now in the oneness of eternity or God, I said, you are now in the oneness of the Christ consciousness, which is not even within my comprehension, because I always link that to Christianity, which I'm not a Christian. And I had to sit with that. Why has that just happened? Because I wouldn't express it. It was something that I was just inspired and compelled to say to this person. And within that, when I sat, it was basically a case of the Christ consciousness is God. The Christ consciousness is the creator. It's just a concept of something that is said within Jesus, that he was known as Christ. And my perception of that was, oh my gosh, I'm saying that Jesus is is with this person, and I'm a spiritualist, and as I'm sat with it, you know, I was sort of like receiving the Christ consciousness is held within all of us. Jesus held the Christ consciousness, but and that is the perception of that. That is what it's meant. So the Christ consciousness is within us and around us, as and it's not it's no different to the power, to God, to Allah, to all these different understandings of what God is. And do you know, that really it shocked me. That was the feeling, because I had to sit with it and thinking, oh my gosh, I'd get struck off here if anybody had heard me say this. But my understanding of it is that there is no difference. But what it did make me realize was that in where I've been trying to help people to understand the power and their perception of it within themselves, and I was trying to remove the barriers of the word God, but I was actually given a doorway to open for other people that would accept Christ consciousness. So I thought, wow, I've been given something that is, you know, on about breaking away take away barriers, but actually I've been given something that is opening something up for somebody else. So it's making it sort of multi-dimensional or multifaceted in some ways, of being able to be open to receive or to know that power themselves.
Isn't it interesting, though, that religion's meant to be obviously there to promote the power of God, and it's religion in itself that is actually the barrier for so many people accessing it, because of how religions are used to control people and used to assert power over people. So, you know, and it's a great shame, because it's almost like organizations that and religions that exist for nothing more than promoting the word of God and the power are actually the barrier for a lot of people accessing it at the beginning. But I think part of the problem is the fact that, you know, a lot of religions said for you to access the power, to go back home to the power, whatever it might be, you need to live these 10 commandments. So we almost feel that, you know, and how religion even promotes it is, in a lot of senses, not that I'm a massive expert on Christianity, because I've never really wanted to go there, but it's almost seen that the power is outside of you. So you can understand why people have got this big concept, because a lot of the time it's the beliefs that they have and the experiences that they've had. And a lot of people arrive into things like mediumship off the back of a difficult point in their life where they probably have lost all faith in that of the power. And then for someone like us, like a medium, to come along and then to give them a concept such as the power lives within you, you know, can be very difficult for people to swallow. But even in parts of my life, when I go back to my 20s, when, you know, I was struggling with addiction and all things like that, obviously the power was still within me. I am always part of God. But I wondered to myself at that time, was it a fact that the power was lying dormant in some sense because it wasn't connecting back to the source? It was almost like that. Was that perhaps why my soul was yearning for this awakening, because of the fact that the power wasn't being accessed, because I was spending the majority of my time anxiety in my head?
We'll be right back.
If you're interested in mediumship, I'd love to invite you to something a little bit special. On Friday, the 28th of August at 7:30 p.m. UK time, I'm hosting a free online evening of mediumship with the wonderful Nicola Farmer. It'll be an evening of spirit communication, love, laughter, and connection. It's completely free, live on Zoom, and absolutely everybody is welcome. You'll find all the joining details in the episode notes, and I'd love to see you there.
Yeah. No, I agree with you with that. And it was something I actually spoke about in last night's Sitting in the Power session, because it come up to my anniversary of being alcohol free. And I was actually describing in a way of that when we are addicted to something, we're distracted. So we're distracted to whatever it is, a substance, the drink, or even chocolate, work, whatever it is, we're distracted to that. And we're sort of like focused on that and won't allow anything else to come in, because that becomes the most important thing within your life. What your next drink is, what your next whatever is. And so that all it is, it's a distance in your distraction. And obviously, and as we know, they can have a detrimental part to your life. It can even end it. You know, if I hadn't have stopped drinking, then I wouldn't be sat here now. And I'm 100% know that, because of the chaos and the destruction and the physical aspects it caused to my life. But when I stopped that, it was, again, that was kind of like a spiritual experience, an understanding at that time. Something was different compared to the times that I'd stopped before. But
What was different?
well, what was different was I was prolonging. I'd actually gone to the doctors, and I had to be weaned off alcohol. They actually wanted to put me back into a detox center, and I said no, I want to be at home. But they give you these tablets, and I end up abusing these tablets that I was on, because I ran out too quickly of them where you're supposed to wean yourself off. So I was really like, as long as I'm not drinking, it's all right. But I'll have these tablets, and then they're gone. It was so, I mean, it sounds absolutely bonkers, this, and I have said it before, but I started drinking Benylin, which is a cough medicine, and it was just something that I could take the edge off whatever I was feeling, and this sense of withdrawal, and it was this voice that I heard, and I don't know, even now I don't know whether this was my own soul or whether this was the spirit world, but it just said, why do you keep doing this? Because you know you're going to have to stop. Just throw the bottle. And I did. And from that point, I was 23 years old, and I never touched alcohol again, and I got into that situation again. So yeah, I'd never touched alcohol since that time. And I knew something was different, in that some sort of experience had happened. I can't explain the experience other than it was a spiritual experience, and it just maintained my sobriety within that. And I feel like it was an inner knowing. And when I was 23, when I first went to Alpha Finley College, I was 24. So that's when I started to learn about mediumship more in depth, further away from my local spiritualist church, because it was a different understanding compared to what I was learning in my local church to what was presented at the Alpha Finley College. And I just feel like it was like a constant then. Maybe the power became my distraction.
I
You
can
know,
relate to that. I
maybe.
can, because even when I was struggling with my time of addiction, and I can really relate to that, because it was almost like, I kept saying to myself, right, I need to stop now. I need to stop now. And it's almost like, oh, I'll just do it again. Oh, I'll just have another weekend of it, of doing drugs and whatever. And then I thought, well, the time needs to come. When are you going to stop this? And I would say I would say it was a spiritual experience that kind of catapulted it for me, really, because I felt I heard a voice say, look, you need to stop this sooner or later. Why are you absolutely dragging this out? Because I remember distinctly writing in one of my diaries at the back end of a year what I wanted to achieve. And one of the things was, right, I want sobriety. And then it got to September in the diary, and I thought, you're going to end up getting another diary and writing in the back of this one. And when is enough going to be enough? But I would say that the first time that I actually experienced the power was in a meditation, but I knew when I touched it and I knew when I experienced it because of the feeling that I got. And a lot of people do get in touch with this podcast, not really understanding what they should be feeling, what the concept should be. And even like you said, when you had that spiritual experience, it's very hard for you to articulate that. And it's very hard for me to articulate mine because it does, even when you explain a spiritual experience to someone, people tell me about experiences all the time, and I go, oh, yes, wow, that sounds incredible. But it doesn't really mean a lot unless it's actually happened to you, or unless you've felt it, you've experienced it, and so on. So the concept of sitting in the power for me for a long time was me sitting down, just trying to quieten my mind. But I think the reason it took me a while in the early days to even come close to experiencing it was because the whole time I was sitting there trying to access it, and it was the trying that was creating all the resistance rather than just allowing it to come. But you, for instance, I know, use and access, because you just seem to me, Adam, like one of the most creative people. 1 minute you're doing poetry, then you're releasing songs, then you're recording and learning instruments. So, it really makes the point that, the power is there and the power is infinite in its intelligence. And I've been doing a lot of reading recently into morphic fields and how people use those to tap into. But the power can be used in so many different ways, more than even our brain can comprehend. How has your relationship changed with it? And even to some people saying your relationship with the power, that might sound like a strange concept for someone to understand. How can you have a relationship with something that's in you?
Yeah. Well, I think it's obviously the things that I've done or I've been inspired to do, thinking, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this, or where has this come from, or why have I been moved to do this? And really, the answers are within. And I probably told you the story about Dan Fielding, who's a good friend of mine, and we have wrote some songs together. But he used to come to my classes like years ago, and fundamentally it would always be we'd be sitting in the power, and then we'd go on to do something else. And 3 weeks into that course, he said to me, Adam, something weird's happening, because he was in a local band and he was the drummer in the band. So the drummer's at the back, aren't they, usually? And he says, I'm getting this feeling to get up and sing and be like at the forefront, the foreman of the band. And I'm like, well, I said, that might be a great thing. He says, but you don't understand. I've actually been doing it. And he says, and I love it. And it's only been happening since I've been coming to these classes. I'd not had the urge to do that before. And I says, well, it must be the soul that wants to do this. It's encouraging you to be that. You're being encouraged, and it's the power that's influencing and guiding you to do that. So, and he had a wonderful potential for mediumship, but he's a musician. Now, he went on to become a one-man band, doing musical theatre and all these wonderful things. And he's in construction as well. He was in construction, doing project management. So it was where people come from within that. But then he was really interested in the power too, and read Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. And so he got his understanding of that, from his perspective, how it incorporated into his life. And it's and that taught me the potential of this power, that that they were all learning about mediumship, and this was to strengthen their mediumship, to attune to the spirit world, and to understand the faculties and the strengths of the mediumship. But this was actually it was involved in life. It's involved in life itself, because then it made me realize that not everyone's a medium. Not everyone's going to be on a platform. Not everyone's going to be doing private sittings, but everyone's got a soul and a spirit. And if we're activating the soul and its potential through the power of the spirit, through knowing the power of God and the perception of that to them, then the soul can unfold in ways that you can't comprehend. And it may not be that it may be mediumship, or it may be learning about mediumship and communication that brings you to that point, but it's not at that point that you stay. There's other directions that you may go in, but I think sometimes people can feel, oh, this is my purpose. I'm the communicator between the two worlds, and that's where I stay. And they can sort of pigeonhole themselves or put themselves in a box, even trying to fit a square peg into a hole in some ways. And really, if they was to continue to understand the power and move with it, live with it, evolve with it, and trust it, then they'll find that their life will go into different directions. And it might be that mediumship has to go on hold for a certain amount of time. I've done that. I've had, I didn't know why, but I've said to my friend, and this was only not a few years ago, I've just got this feeling I'm not going to demonstrate mediumship anymore. And I don't know why. Just as we were about to demonstrate somewhere as well. And it was afterwards, I cancelled everything and said, I will speak, but I'm not demonstrating mediumship. And my poetry came then, so it was, and you sort of like thinking, am I mad? All this
Well,
training.
you followed what you felt, and there's something very beautiful about that, because a lot of the time we don't, and especially when you're someone that's so of service anyway, for you to do something as radical as that, to cancel something, I know would be I know you, Adam, you'd be having guilt beyond guilt of even thinking about doing it. But it reminds me very much of my recent situation with my business. It was the power that made me decide to leave. It was in the days building up. I knew that the decision I was making was going to bring about serious amounts of change. And actually, if it wasn't for the spirit world, I wouldn't have. Would I have done it? I would have thought much more carefully, because it had massive implications. But it was because I felt so called that I had to do it, regardless of the lay of the land. I didn't have an exact plan in my mind, but I knew that it was in my soul's path to make this decision. And as the weeks have gone on since then, I've had a lot of confirmation that I have made the right decision. But it's my relationship with the power is definitely evolved and changed over time. And I feel that even just a lot of the soul sync is inspired in one way or another by the power. But that's when you start really believing in it, knowing in it, you've been touched by it. I think it is so transformational in what it can do in your life. And I look at my life since discovering it and how many aspects of it have changed. But I think a lot of people, even artists, people in creative spaces, come across the power. Sometimes they don't even realize they've accessed it. They just get this jolt of inspiration. But I always feel, especially with mediums, being that is the arena in which I operate, I can tell if someone is being touched by the power. I can tell if someone is in the power when they're working. And I know now that the easiest way for me to identify when I do get a no, it's because I've moved out of the power. And I can even tell that because there's a distinction in everything. When I'm in the power, I don't actually even remember the reading that well afterwards, because I was so immersed in that energy. But it took me a long time to really discover when I'm in the power what it feels like when I'm out the power. And I guess this is what the process of sitting in the power is to start to work with it, to understand how it works and feels for you. Because I think a lot of people, I think we're too quick to give up as well these days. We want everything on a platter, don't we? We sort of
Yeah.
expect to sort of come along to Adam Berry's lovely Monday nights at 7 o'clock, and after 6 weeks, be there like some kind of superhero, manipulating the power like never before. But it takes time, and I think part of the reason it takes a long time is because you're not going to feel that you've been touched by the power if you're never having time to even quieten the mind. Where's the inspiration going to come in if you're, living a life where you're rushing 10 to the dozen?
Yeah.
And, do you tend to find that with people? What is, people's experiences? Because you've got this fortunate position of sitting in the powers every Monday. Do you see that difference in people as the weeks go on when they start developing that relationship with it?
Yeah, and I get feedback from it as well, how it's changed people. I get messages how it's changed people, and I think, and that really warms my heart, because I feel like, well, this is what it's for. It's a space for people to be able to recognize, acknowledge with gratitude that the very creative power within them and around them, and whatever stage that they're at, it can just strengthen within that. And I'll always say as well that it's something that we can feel it at varying different degrees to where we are at that moment in time as well. So if we have got a lot of things going on in our lives, or we might feel it a little less. I think the myth as well is that people say you've got to silence your mind. And it's like, my
Mhm.
gosh, you and I both know silencing the mind is impossible. And what I changed that concept to is we can bring stillness to the body. And as we bring stillness to the body, it invites the mind to quieten down. So we can quieten it down. But I use the mind as the mind is the observer, but the
Mhm.
mind is also the navigator. So you're not having this battle with your mind of it needs to be silent. I shouldn't be hearing anything. I shouldn't be, doing this, that, and the other, because that's what, when someone says you need to silence your mind, then, well, I'm not doing it right because I can't silence my mind. You've got to adapt your mind into the way of how you think, how you feel. And it's that concept of what Mavis taught. My understanding of a lot of things is through Mavis's teachings, Mavis Patilla. And, she taught us about the conscious mind versus the soul mind. So the conscious mind is the lion, it wants to feel safe, it wants to be in control. And so it can be overpowering in situations to make it feel safe, to be in control. And the lamb is the soul mind, is the vulnerable, is the gentle part. And the trick is to allow the lion to lay down with the lamb.
All
Um,
dangerous, very
yeah.
dangerous, Adam. That sounds like.
But that's it, because you see within nature, I think it's the perfect concept for me as well, because
Yes.
it just resonates, and people can really resonate when I'm teaching that of Mavis's teachings as well, because the conscious mind is full of limitations, because the conscious mind is everything that we've learned, everything that we've experienced, and even our traumas, our survival mechanisms are all built in within our conscious mind. And we have an unconscious part of us, and somebody could say something and it could trigger something that will set our conscious mind into react in a negative way because of something that is deep within us. And I believe that the soul mind of us, so again, I was taught this through the mediumship way. So when we're in that state of being in the power of mediumship and the communicator, being attuned, the thing that can destroy that is the conscious mind. By,
Yeah.
is it me? Is it spirit? Is it, I'm not good enough to get up and do this. all these negative limiting beliefs that we have in our life in general, that we're not good enough, can have a detrimental impact on our communication with the spirit world, because it's something that can just interfere and destroy it. And it's like when somebody says no to you in that communication, it's like, oh God, and that no triggers something of rejection within you that then starts to, and it can totally ruin
Well,
the
it can. You
communication.
sort of, I remember through a stage of mind development, you get the no, and all of a sudden, link is broken with spirit person, because the first thing I've done with the no is it has given me a slight trigger. Then I go in my head, then I start thinking about it. Then there's my mind's going 10 to the dozen. And you're right in what you're saying. For a long time, and for a lot of people, we see the mind as the enemy, especially in mediumship. Right, we're trying to shut the mind down. We don't want that to happen. Well, at the end of the day, that is how mediumship is working, is through the mind, through our memory bank. And I think it's very unhelpful to be dressing it up in that way. And especially with people going into meditation, if you're going in with that mindset from the beginning, you are probably going to find that you stop doing meditation very quickly, because all you feel like is a failure. But I've had points in
Absolutely.
my life where that unhelpful tiger part of the mind has controlled me rather than I control it. And I would even say at times it's ran so much away with me. I remember distinct points in my late 20s where I thought to myself, my mind is controlling me. I'm not in control of that, of the mind, because, I would just be in a state of anxiety a lot. And I think it even took me by surprise when I finally was starting to get things more under control, just how much of my brain would default to glass half empty thinking. Because terrible overthinker, Adam, I will always be considering the worst case scenario. I'm a naturally very optimistic person, but like everyone, I get that unhelpful ego, want to chip in with unhelpful comments. But it's about being gentle. And even I think a lot of the time as human beings, we get so hard on ourselves. We have to do it like this, and it should be like this, and it should be like that. But if you're going to bring change about, you've got to be kind to yourself in the way you talk to yourself and the way that you deal with yourself. Because if you're not gentle and you're just going to absolutely beat yourself up, that's not going to get you any closer to the power necessarily.
Mhm.
And I could be really hard on myself, always saying, oh, you should do more of this, you should do more of that. My current one, Adam, is I'm beating myself up a bit for eating too many Kit Kats and putting on a few extra pounds during this period. But
Yeah.
then I always give myself that quiet and time, and I always try and make time every day for the power. But the way I used to do it was, oh, I need to sit for at least 20 minutes in a room of silence with the blind down with my special eye mask. Now it's a lot more mobile, my relationship with the power. I tend to
Yeah.
do it much more in nature. But
Yeah.
I know I know now these days when I'm in that power and when I'm working with the power. But it varies on days. Some days I'm tired. Some days I'm not really feeling it. But I've come to also accept the fact that on the days I'm not feeling it, it doesn't mean it's not there, and it doesn't mean things are not happening in the background, does it?
No, no. And I think as well with I used to beat myself up for not doing sitting in the power enough. And what I started to realize is that I was only doing it became conditional. If I had a private sitting, oh, I need to sit in the power. And I'd be like thinking about it right up until that. I mean, or a demonstration of mediumship, and it'd be like, oh, I've got 2 weeks before I'm doing this demonstration, or whatever. I need to start sitting in the power. And then before you know it, it's the demonstration's there, and oh, it's going to be rubbish now because I've not sat in the power. And you have all these different negative thoughts that come in. And and if you think like that, then it will. That's the
Yeah.
thing. So there is a lot of psychology with it, but my understanding now is that I do it unconditionally. I do it because I want to do it. I do it because I enjoy it. And I'll do it if I'm feeling stressed with something, just to take that moment and focus on the breath, being mindful of the presence, and just being in that. And, it doesn't have to be 20 minutes. The breath takes you there in a second.
Hmm.
I've got into a habit now of when I get up in the morning, I just take a breath, and it's like I'm breathing in and being and recognizing and acknowledging the power. And it's like, in some ways, it's like a living prayer, because I'm thankful for the day ahead. I'm thankful and it's this sense of gratitude. But I also get that as soon as my head hits the pillow at night, and you get that nice sort of feeling that before you go to sleep, and you can just sort of like let go and start breathing. That again is that same essence of, I'm grateful for the day. I'm grateful in the essence of everything, and I'm actually breathing it in. I'm being it, and that to me is the essence of recognizing, acknowledging the power too. So it's like a little maintenance, I suppose, in some ways, if
Well,
you
it
looked at it
is.
in
You've
that.
got to make that time for you, don't you? And
Yeah,
I keep saying, right, I want to start doing it in the mornings, but I haven't quite got into that habit yet. I do find it hard for me to get into habits. It does take me a bit of time for something to become part of my day every day. My thing is normally to sit in the evenings. But I used to say the same thing. Well, I must sit for this amount of time. I tend to not sit for too long before a reading. If I've got a reading, 5, 10 minutes at absolute most. Any more than that, and my mind will kick in. But you have to find what works for you, because even like you've said, you've got your little tricks and way of working. I've got mine as well, and I understand what I need to do in order to stay in that. Even with how long it takes me when a spirit person first comes, I'm like a horse out the paddock in mediumship. I just want to, as soon as I'm got someone, my big thing is trying to slow down a bit, because it's almost like sometimes ask the sitter, you know, did they understand that? And they've almost had about 10 things by that point to then try and unravel. But, I'm trying to make sure myself these days that I'm just, because it's such a beautiful thing to do. You setting up with doing that at the beginning of your day, oozing gratitude, the vibration you were on for the day then, and how that sets up your day. I imagine your day feels very different when you start the day with that habit versus not.
yeah, it can do, but it can also, it doesn't mean that the day is going to be like floating on a cloud. You have frustrating days, but I believe as well, and especially because of my addictive nature of the past, which is always only ever a drink away to the future. Do you know that's it's you're only whatever away from that is being back there is your next drink or next whatever. And I think what it does, helps me to tolerate things in life, gives me more patience with things that maybe I'm struggling with, compared to how I would handle it previously. And I think, it's something that you just, it, it's a bit like a safety net in some ways. It helps, it cushions things. It doesn't stop the effects of life and the heartbreak of life and all those different things and frustrations. But it's this knowing that I might be going through this now, but everything's going to be okay.
I
And
always
like,
find that I've got clarity after sitting in the power. If I feel that I'm stuck, or especially at the moment when I'm trying to think, okay, what am I going to do next with the rest of my life? I sit in the power and I instantly feel clarity. I don't really question where I've got things from as
yeah,
much these days. I used to be very much bothered by, okay, where's that come from? Where's that thought come from? But I know generally now that when it's different between whether it's me or spirit. But I also am not too fussed. When I make that time, I always feel better for it in one way or another, whether that's because I've just given myself time, whether I've had inspiration drop in. And sometimes I just want to sit with no expectation. And I think, so often I would always used to go into these things with an expectation, with a want. And I think that's another big mistake we make, always wanting to go into it for something. And I think sometimes you're limiting then what you may get from the experience. But I always feel calmer afterwards, actually. And whenever I've got an issue in my life, the power is the first place I always turn to, because it is like a tonic. And it's through that feeling that sometimes it just brings me back into a place where I go, do you know what? Let's put things into perspective. This is work. You are eternal. You don't need to fear anything. It's that time to just, I think, reconnect to what is true, because it is difficult. I have periods where, you know, we're living this normal life in the stresses of life, and times you can find that I can start feeling disconnected, like I'm almost not connected enough, like I'm getting too absorbed in the choppy waters of the life around you. And it can be very hard, I feel, as a medium, to sort of walk between these two worlds at times, because real life can be tough. And I wish every day I could just sit there, like a Buddhist monk, and do things that were very nourishing, Adam, for my soul. But we have to go out there, we have to make an income, and we have to be surrounded by people that aren't always particularly sensitive and complementary to how we are as sensitive people. But I try, and I find the one thing the power is good for is, one of my shortfalls in life is patience, Adam. And I feel that it's giving me a better sense of patience the more my relationship continues to evolve. What makes you so passionate? Because for people that are listening now that don't know this, every single Monday, 7 o'clock UK time, Adam, like a warrior, I don't think you ever miss a week, do you? Unless there's some catastrophe. But you
Well,
do Sitting in the Power. And following this interview today, there's going to be a Sitting in the Power released. Why is it you do that every single week? What is it about that act of bringing people together that matters so much to you?
well, it's something that, and I say this in complete honesty, it's one of my favorite parts of the week to be hosting Sitting in the Power. It's it's been actually transformational for me hosting it and to experience it, and just knowing that it's making a difference in other people's lives. It's like if you could bottle something and present it and give it away. I feel like I'm doing that in some ways, but they actually activating that themselves. It's something that is happening within them. I'm just the facilitator, creating the space. I call it the spiritual gym as well,
Yeah.
because it's something that people can dip in and out of doing. It will strengthen their sensitivity, strengthen their faculties in and the life in some ways. I call it like the guidance, the compass that we follow. So, like for example, with Dan, he felt this sort of like urge to get up. Well, this is the the urge of the soul of the lights all going in unison. That following that, and he followed the compass of that light, of that guidance, and he got up and sang, and that then was the inspiration that has led him to the points of where he is now in his life, where he's gone a lot more further into that of his purpose. And it takes that. Sometimes it can just be the smallest of things that can really shift you into a different pathway, a different understanding. And I just, for me, I just feel passionate about people. And also what I recognize as well is that there's so much division in the world. There's so much conflict. And, we are being pitted against each other in these different groups and societies and all these things. When really what the power recognizes within us all is that we are of one. That is the one thing that is within us that unites us all. And there is no separateness within that. Our soul has the individual journey and its pathway, but the spirit within, God, the creator, is the one thing that is within everything and everyone, and nothing and no one can live without. And we spend so much time with the lions within our lives that controlling and dictating and having all these, and the fear that separates us from the power, from God, from our souls, even, from our purpose, because there's a fear of something that's been put between us that's dividing the world. And if we could all be in that unison, I think if there could be like a global sitting in the power, the global recognition, how much good it could do in recognizing, because once people are in that collective state, there is no difference, there's no separateness, there's no division, there's no skin color, there's no sexuality, there's no religion, there's none of these segregations that come in, and it's just a beautiful place of home to be. And the more of the conflicts that go in, and the war and the divisions, that the less people are putting their attention to God or their own soul and their own pathway. They become focused on another agenda that is not their war, it's not their conflict, it's something that's completely separate. And they'd realize that if they could just be within the essence of that power. So within that, my passion is that it's my time is free and I do it of service, but I want people to donate to their own communities, to their own charities, to places that have helped them to get to where they are at this point. It may be a spiritualist church, it may be a church, it may be a charity, but help those centers of light or those places of light to help people to get to where they are at that moment.
Mm.
And I've changed my concepts as well of where healing is, because I feel that instead of sending healing energy to somebody or something, what I feel our intention should be that those people in need the most around the world, our intention and our motivation, intention, I'm not sure where I'm going with this now, but our intention should be that those people in need the most, may they be able to feel and know this power, because it is that power that will ignite their soul, awaken their soul, will inspire them to live, will inspire healing within them. So it's,
That's an interesting way of framing it, because if they're aware of the power, then they're going to have the ability to heal. They're going to have the ability to find where they need to be, where they need to
yeah,
go. And it's interesting because although I send all the time, I send healing and whatever. When someone says that to me, I've often thought in the back of my mind that if they were aware of the power. So it's interesting that you bring that up. It really is.
yeah, because in reality, really, we're all sentient beings. We've all come here with sort of complete in some ways, and we're sort of like how we're nurtured and taught, we're always to rely upon people, and and obviously we need that when we come into the world, because we can't feed ourselves and all that stuff physically. But I see sort of like sitting in the power and the Monday nights is creating that space for people to be independent, but it's collective, but it's independence of their own, not looking to anybody else. That
Mm.
something that we said before as well, when you said you don't know where it comes from, but you feel inspiration and you get clarity. So one of my ways within the sit in the power session as well is that they're open to divine knowledge. They are open to divine knowledge, and nobody knows you better than your own soul. And the soul knows as much as the spirit world. And it's allowing the soul to rise
Mm.
beyond the conscious mind, because the conscious mind is limited to what we know and have experienced here, but allowing the soul to rise beyond the conscious mind, and then we can be educated in that way. That's where the clarity comes through. That's where the divine knowledge comes through. That's where the inspiration comes through. And it's something, and then the conscious mind can use that then to take it further. So it's allowing that, again, the lion to lay down with the lamb, that unison, that, yeah, just the, I don't like to say connection, because I feel like, because we are always connected, but we turn to jargon everything about connected to the spirit world, connected to this, that, and the other, connected to the power. But really, we are the power, and we're never disconnected from it. We're never separate from it.
Yeah, even the word connecting, it implies that you're having to reach out. You know, I guess maybe that's why I might say a retuning of that to the spirit world, or what's the other word I like? I'm trying to think of it now. What's the word they normally use? A tuning. Because again, even the word connection in those early days, I can understand why that word was unhelpful in the overall scheme of things, because it made me feel that there was something required of me that I had to strive for, had to learn, had to do in order to facilitate that. So language matters, doesn't it? Words are very, very, very important.
Yeah, and it might seem like semantics of language, but it's like that with the word God. If you're uncomfortable with the word God, then use creator, use universal power, and it is just a word. And even like when we'll go out and we'll say, "Oh, I'm going to go out and I'm going to connect with nature." You already are nature. You know,
Exactly.
change it to, I'm remembering that I am nature.
Yes.
I'm remembering that I am God. I'm remembering that there is no separation from the spirit world. You know, that there is no separation. It's just the different stages of our awareness, and that the conscious mind can try to separate and try to divide that with distractions, but ultimately never disconnected.
I'm starting to feel very much that my lion can lay down with my lamb these days, but it's been a journey, Adam. It's been one of a lot of training. I've had to train the lion not to bite the head off the lamb, which was a lot. Which was a lot of training in its
works in progress.
It is indeed. So the next episode will be You're Sitting in the Power Meditation. And if you do want to find out more, go to the show notes where you can find all the details of that. Every week with Adam, a true spiritual warrior, Adam Berry. Thank you so much for coming back onto the Soul Sync.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for having me. It's been a wonderful time.